Okay, so here's a picture of the posterior aspect of the heart. So on it you can see the aorta, you can see the pulmonary arteries, the pulmonary or the superior vena cava, the inferior vena cava, and then you can see the pulmonary veins. Okay, it's kind of weird to look at it when you haven't looked at the models, but this is basically what you're going to see. Okay, now here's a frontal cut through the heart. So if we look at it again and just kind of go over the parts, okay, the big parts is, so here's ascending aorta is here. Okay, here's the superior vena cava, okay, inferior vena cava. Here's right atrium. Okay, then here's the right AV valve. Here's the right ventricle. Okay, here's the pulmonary valve. There's pulmonary trunk. Okay, the pulmonary trunk is going to split, and it's going to go to one part of it's going to go to the right lung, and one part of it's going to go to the left lung. Okay, and then the blood comes back from the heart. Okay, and it's going to go in the pulmonary arteries. Okay, and it's going to go in the right atrium, or the left atrium, sorry, through the left AV valve, and then into the left ventricle. Then the blood will go out the aortic semilunar and out the aorta into the body. Okay, there's lots of stuff on there we're going to hit as we go through this. Okay, now the way that the valves work is that they're going to control the backflow of blood through the heart. So what you're doing is you're trying to pump the blood through the heart in one direction. You don't want it to go backwards. So it's always going to go from the atria to the ventricles, and then from the ventricles out. So you don't want it to go backwards. So the way that the valves work is that when your heart is pumping, okay, the blood is going to go through the valves. Okay, then when the ventricles, the atria are going to contract, and then the ventricles are going to contract. Okay, so the top two chambers will contract, and then the bottom two chambers will contract. When the top two chambers contract, you want the AV valves to be open. Okay, when the bottom two contract, you want the AV valves to close because you don't want the blood to go back to the atrium. So here's what happens is there are little muscles that are called papillary muscles, and they are attached to these cords called the chordae tendineae. Okay, the papillary muscles contract and they hold onto the cords and they don't let the valves open up, so the blood can't go back to the atria. Okay, so we'll go through it all. Okay, now what's going to happen is changes in the pressure because of the contraction is going to control the blood flow. Okay, so blood flows through the heart from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure. Okay, so the pressure is related to the size and the volume of the chamber. So what's going to control the flow of blood is the contraction and relaxation of the muscle, so the heart muscle, and the opening and the closing of the valves. Okay, now there are blood vessels on the heart that are going to deliver oxygenated blood to the heart. Okay, and they're going to take the carbon dioxide away. So those are called the coronary vessels. Let's see, I think we have a picture where you can see them. So if you look at this picture, you can kind of see the coronary vessels. So this is a coronary vessel. Okay, here's one, here's another branch. So if you think about it, your heart has to beat constantly. So it's got to be beating all the time. There's no rest for it. And your heart doesn't get tired. Okay, so basically what has to happen is the heart muscle has to have a continuous supply of oxygen. So it's got its own blood vessels. Now, when those blood vessels get blocked, something happens to them. That's what causes a heart attack. Okay, now if we go back here. Okay, so it's going to take oxygen to the tissue and remove carbon dioxide. Okay, now they also have their own veins. So all the deoxygenated blood is going to return to the right atrium through this part that's called the coronary sinus. Okay, so it's like a big modified vein that's going to take the blood back to the heart. Okay, now here's blood flow through the heart. So it's just all written out for you here. Okay, so we're going to start at the right atrium. Okay, and if you look, okay, there's two different kinds of blood that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about blue blood and red blood. Okay, so blood that's blue, we consider oxygen poor or deoxygenated. Blood that's red, we consider oxygenated or oxygen rich. Okay, so let's start at the right atrium. Okay, so we have it written out, we have it labeled on here, but we also have it kind of written out over here. Okay, so if we start at the right atrium, okay, so blood, oxygen poor blood returns from the body and it goes to the right atrium. Okay, from there, it's going to go through the tricuspid valve or the right AV valve to the right ventricle. Okay, from the right ventricle, it's going to go through the pulmonary valve and out the pulmonary trunk and then out the pulmonary arteries. From there, it goes to the lungs. Okay, and in the lungs, what's going to happen is that deoxygenated blood is going to pick up oxygen and going to drop off carbon dioxide. Okay, that blue blood then becomes red blood. Okay, so the oxygenated blood then returns to the heart through the pulmonary veins. From the pulmonary veins, it dumps into the left atrium. From the left atrium, it goes to the bicuspid valve or the left AV valve and to the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, it goes out the aortic valve, out the aorta, and then to the rest of the body. So the blood is then delivered to your tissue, and when it goes to your tissue, what happens is we're going to drop off oxygen and pick up CO2. So guess what? The blood turns from red blood to blue blood. The blue blood travels back through various veins, and eventually what it's going to do is it's going to dump into the superior vena cava if it's coming from above your heart, the inferior vena cava if it's coming from below your heart, or the coronary sinus if it's coming from within your heart, from the veins that are supplying your heart. So that's blood flow through the heart. It's important. Okay, now the cardiac conduction system of the heart. Okay, so what it is, it's specialized muscle cell, cardiac muscle cell or myocardium tissue, and what it's going to do is it generates and distributes the action potentials. So basically, your heart can beat without being attached to your brain. Okay, so the heart can regulate itself. It has its own pacemaker. Okay, so if you take somebody's heart out of the body, or I always think of Indiana Jones. In the one Indiana Jones at the very end, they take a heart out and hold it up. I guess it's a sacrifice, and they hold it up and the heart's still beating. Okay, so if the heart can beat until it runs out of oxygen and runs out of ATP. Okay, so the reason that it can do this is because it has its own pacemaker. So the pacemaker in the heart is called the sinoatrial or SA node. And that's the pacemaker. The information is going to travel from the SA node to the AV node, okay, through this AV bundle. Okay, they used to call it the bundle of His, to these things called the bundle branches, and then the Purkinje fibers. Okay, so this is how the electrical signaling occurs in the heart. So let me show you on this next slide. Okay, so this shows you a picture of it. So what happens is these cells in the conduction system have what we call a floating membrane potential. So they don't stay at a constant resting membrane potential. They have leak channels, and the membrane potential is going to change, and it's like a rhythmic changing. So what happens is this sinoatrial node, okay, starts the impulse. Okay, so it's going to say, okay, you need to depolarize now. Okay, so it's going to send the message through the atria, okay, and to this AV node. Okay, so if you look, the SA node is up in the top of the right atrium. The AV node is at the bottom of the right atrium. Okay, so this is going to tell the two atria to depolarize, and for them to contract. Okay, it's going to say, okay, now is the time for you to contract. Okay, after they contract, or while they're contracting, the message is being sent to the AV node. Okay, and the AV node is going to take the message all the way down, okay, through these AV bundle and these bundle branches. Okay, so the bundle's up here. And then through these branches, okay, and then back up the sides of the ventricles, okay, and it's going to trigger those ventricles to contract. Okay, and the ventricles are going to contract from the bottom up. Okay, so it goes SA node, the message goes to the AV node, then it goes through the AV bundle to the right and left bundle branches, and then up these Purkinje fibers. Okay, so SA node says atria contract. AV node goes all the way through this, and then the ventricles contract. Okay, so this is an animation of it. It'll show you. Okay, now I'm going to stop and make this smaller.